Although we might be ready for the Switch 2, Nintendo most definitely are not. With the Nintendo Switch releases still not slowing down whatsoever. With not only there being a ton of fantastic indie games that have released, but also some incredible first-party games as well. But unfortunately, it's not all good news, because alongside some incredible brand new Nintendo Switch releases, we also have some pretty terrible ones, and not all of them are the fault of the Nintendo Switch. So today I'm going to be going over some brand new Nintendo Switch games that are worth buying and some I think you should avoid. Let's start with the big one, shall we? And that is The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. Now, this was a title I was really excited for, because actually the 2D Zeldas are among some of my favourite. And although I absolutely adored Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, I really did want something more along the lines of Spirit Tracks and Phantom Hourglass. The only issue is, when I saw the trailer for Echoes of Wisdom, I was a little bit worried that this was going to be more like Link's Awakening and less like the games that I was after, seeing as the art style seems to be very similar. But thankfully this was a combination of everything that I loved from 2D Zelda, meshed in with all the best parts of 3D Zelda as well. But by far my favourite part about all of this game was the fact that you play as Zelda, who needs to go out and save Link. And although you are able to use a sword to beat up enemies like Link would do with your special power, by far the thing you're going to use the most is this thing called Echoes, where you can copy any object and bring it out at your will to either help you with fighting or to help you out with puzzles. And for the most part, I really did adore this mechanic. The puzzles that they came up with and the solutions were so creative and so fun. I honestly had an absolute blast doing each of the dungeons. And I don't think anything could have prepared me for just how many echoes are in this game, to the point where actually sifting through them got to be a little bit frustrating, as it would take you so long to sometimes find the exact echo you were after. Now, the echoes by themselves are really cool and really fun, but it's actually the way they combine with these other abilities that make the puzzles so unique and so different. And this is the ability to either move objects at your own will or to move with the momentum of these objects instead. And when you combine these mechanics with things like currents under the water and that sort of thing, the puzzles get really fun. I will say though, I'm so glad that the echoes are not the only way to battle, because although you can call upon enemies who will attack for you, the AI that controls them isn't always the smartest, and it can get a little bit infuriating when you're just stood there waiting for someone to attack and they just won't manage it. So I am very grateful that they did give you the ability to harness your sword and go out and whack things for yourself. And surprisingly, even though I've more or less finished the game, I didn't really manage to break the echo system at all. It's honestly really solid, and the way in which the echoes interact with the world is something I really enjoyed. Like I, for example, really enjoyed fire, and I got to set fire to a lot of different things, and it's surprising how many solutions to puzzles is simply set everything on fire. Now, when they announced this game, I was a little bit worried that this would be a repeat of Princess Peach, because whilst that game had a lot of promise, it turned out to just be very short and very repetitive, and didn't really have much in the way of story to kind of make you carry on playing. But thankfully, this Zelda game is nothing like that. The game itself clocks out as being around 20 hours or so, and one thing that really surprised me is the size of this map. I was expecting it to be similar to Link's Awakening in that it's not all that huge, but no, this is absolutely massive and has all the different areas that you know and love from previous Zelda games, just put in this slightly different format. But thankfully, this game not only has a really fun and really engrossing main storyline, when you're running around the world, you'll also find a ton of different side quests to go under as well. Some of them being pretty basic, like they'll ask for a specific thing they want to see, and you'll have to make sure that you have that echo to show them. But some of them are really fun, like you get the ability to get this cat suit that allows you to talk to different cats, and even the ability to get your very own horse and run around. But I think the thing that really sold me and made me fall in love with this game is just how detailed it is. Like, for example, at the start of the game, Zelda has to be disguised, and you'll find as you're running around various different wanted posters for Zelda, which I thought was a really nice addition. There's also a cooking mechanic in the shape of smoothies, and this can really help you out either in difficult dungeons or with difficult boss battles. There's also items that can give you different effects when you equip them. Like there's one that can help you jump higher, there's also one that can help you swim faster or hold your breath under the water for longer, so they're really handy. And there's so many secret areas to explore no matter where you are on the map. With some of them rewarding you with money, you can also get rare food items or even heart pieces as well. And sometimes exploring will just reward you with a really useful echo. Now, as much fun as I did have with Zelda, your enjoyment of this game and whether or not you should buy it hinges on one thing, and that is how much can you deal with dropped frames. You see, whilst the game is absolutely stunning and beautiful and for the most part runs well, like for example, I didn't have any frame drops whatsoever when I was in the dungeons, doing boss fights, that kind of thing. When you're traversing the main world, you will most definitely see the frames drop and often see the frames switch from 60 to 30, which can be pretty jarring when it happens. For the most part, I didn't find it affects me, but I know for some people that can be a deal breaker, so definitely something to look out for. The echoes being displayed as a list was far from ideal and did get pretty annoying if you're looking for one very specific echo. Overall, I had a blast. The story was incredible, the writing had so much humor in it, and I loved seeing all of the characters, even if some of them were a little bit cliche. And to me, this is a fantastic game, whether you are a long-time lover of Zelda, brand new to the franchise, or found that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom weren't really your thing. This mashes in so many of the 2D mechanics that we know and love with something that just makes it a little bit more modern. So this is a game I'd recommend to so many people. So that's one of my favorites out the way. Let's get on to one of my biggest disappointments and probably one of the worst games I've played on the Switch in a while. And this is Garden Witch Life. I honestly don't really know where to start with this. Let's go for the biggest thing, and that is the price. So whilst this is currently on sale on Steam for £17, you'll find it on the Nintendo Switch and all other consoles at a whopping £27, which is a pretty substantial increase in price, especially once I get to show you the gameplay. You see, Garden Witch Life has a couple of issues. First and foremost, the thing you're probably going to notice first is the performance on the Nintendo Switch. Now, whilst the game has a couple of different visual modes that you can pick, all of them suffer from the exact same issue, which is this really weird thing where the shadows are constantly moving, and it's not only really distracting when you play the game, it also kind of made me feel a little bit sick. It gave me really bad motion sickness, and I had such a large headache whenever I played this. But sadly, this isn't my only issue with Garden Witch Life. This was meant to be a really cute game where you move to a brand new town and start a brand new life as a witch. Seeing you do anything from making your own magical garden, decorating your tree house, or helping out all the different villagers along the way. The only issue is this game is really, really slow. And I often found myself going to bed pretty early as I had completely run out of things to do other than just basic finding money. They also, for some reason, made the default sprint button on literally every other game I've played a sit down button. So quite often I'll be running around going to sprint to do something, and then my character would just sit down on the floor and not move until you press the right button to get them to stand up, which was, you know, something else. I just feel like this game was not only a little bit awkward to play in the controls and how everything handled, but also the pacing is just way too slow, with there just not being enough to do to fill the days. And even though they have tried to address this with an update, making it easier for you to make money so you could progress a little bit faster, and also getting rid of the terrible fatigue system that made it almost impossible to do anything, I ultimately feel like this is a game that just needs a little bit longer and a bit more polish until it's finished. Not just on the performance side of things, but also things that need to be tweaked in the gameplay as well. And whilst the vision is there, the gameplay is not quite. And the issue really comes down to the fact that for £27, you can get a lot of indie games that are more polished than this and look better than this on the Nintendo Switch. I think if this was around the £15 mark, I wouldn't be so harsh. But for this price and the way it looks, sadly, right now, this is not a game I can recommend. Back to another game that I have been absolutely loving and runs fantastically on the Nintendo Switch is Bloomtown: A Different Story. Now, don't be deceived by the fact that this looks like a cute, cozy game, considering you play as a child who's gone to their grandparents for the summer. This is anything but that, as this is much darker than I originally thought, but that isn't a bad thing whatsoever. And if you are someone who loves the Persona series, this game is going to be right up your alley, as it borrows a lot of different mechanics, but still makes it completely its own. This is set in the 1960s and follows Emily and her younger brother Chester, who set off to their grandpa's quiet town for the summer. But it's not long before you realise that this town isn't as quiet as it seems, as not only do your nightmares start to feel a little bit too real, you also begin to notice that children are disappearing. And you discover a demon world exists right under this town. And it somehow becomes your job, alongside your friends and your trusty dog, to solve this mystery and save the town. But this isn't something you do all by yourself. And much like the likes of Persona, you get to battle with a demon made from your own personality, with each of the characters having their very own demon that all have their own strengths and weaknesses. And you can use these in turn-based battle to help you on your way to save the children, and even tame your very own demons to use in battles as well. And when I say this shares a lot of similarities to Persona, I truly mean it, but all in the best possible way. Because you control absolutely everything about Emily's day-to-day life. You see, whenever there's a strange going on in the town, it's usually the result of a demon. But in order to get to the bottom of it, you're going to have to go into massive dungeons in order to find the demon and slay them. And much like Persona, these dungeons are absolutely massive. But the thing I like about the dungeons is, although they do have a lot of demons for you to battle and take on and capture, there's also a fair amount of puzzles to figure out as well. And they're often not something that you tackle all in one go, with there being different rest stops along the way that you can stop, save your dungeon progress, and go back to your normal daily life on the upside world. But in order for you to take on these demons, you can't just go around doing nothing when you're on the outside world, as you'll need to spend your time either working to earn money so you can buy better gear and weapons. You can also do activities in your spare time to increase some of your stat points. So for example, you can go to the gym in order to increase your strength. And sometimes this helps you in the main story, like for example, there's one point where you need to be strong enough to move something that's in your way, but this also can indirectly help you as well. As some of the things you need to do in the game, like for example some conversation choices or the ability to catch demons, will be determined by a dice roll. And sometimes if one of your stat points is high enough, then your chances for success is much higher. As your team level up, you'll also need to tend to your friendships, giving you these really wonderful cutscenes where you get to know each and every one of your friends a little bit more to discover more about their personality, and in turn makes them more powerful in battles. You can also do a thing called fusion, another trait borrowed from the Persona series, where you can take the demons that you've caught in battle and fuse them together to make a more powerful one. And the one thing I truly love about Bloomtown compared to Persona is the fact that it is the summer holidays. Because one thing you have to do in the Persona games, alongside saving the world, is also studying for your exams. And that can be ridiculously stressful. I spent 9 years at uni to get a PhD and I never wanted to see another exam again. So the Persona series was a lot. But thankfully in Bloomtown, it's the summer holidays. They're 12, you don't have to deal with any of that. Now, if you're new to this style of game, it might feel like you're being thrown so many different mechanics. But the story and the writing makes learning them all so worthwhile. As although the story is pretty dark at times, it's also so unbelievably gripping. And after each dungeon, not only do you get to see the town changed for the better with what you've done and what you've figured out, but you also get to see the relationships between the children grow and blossom as well. And I love this real change between a really dark story all to do with demons, but also a really whimsical one all about a childhood summer about making friends. The only thing that lets this game down is that the map system and the quest system can take a little bit of getting used to. After a while, I kind of got my head around it, but it's definitely different. And also, the translation to the English version has a few mistakes in it here and there. Nothing so big that you couldn't get the gist of what's being said, but just a few mistakes to be noticed. This game took me completely by surprise. It wasn't necessarily the game I expected looking at the trailers, but it's a game that I've come to love massively. Persona has been one of my favorite games of all times, especially Persona 5. And the fact this borrows so much of what makes that game great, but has turned it completely into its own thing, has made me fallen in love with it. Back to a game I can't really recommend on the Nintendo Switch, and that is Caravan Sandwich. Now I'm going to start by saying the game itself is something I really enjoy. The soundtrack is absolutely incredible, the vibes of the game is immaculate, and I love this different take on what it is to be a cozy game. But as you'll soon see with the gameplay I put on screen, sadly it's very much let down by its performance. This is a narrative-driven exploration adventure based in a sci-fi world where you're on the hunt for your missing sister. Because even though you haven't seen her for years, you get a distress signal sent from her ship, and you decide to go back to your home planet to investigate. And with no combat, no death, and no timer, it's just you and your van and a mystery to uncover. And the world you're exploring is one that is post-apocalyptic. A world in which humans destroyed and most left after the planet's destruction. And when you go back, not only do you get to meet the humans who stayed behind, but also the robots who were left. The main issue is this game's big draw point is driving around and exploring and investigating things you see along the way, but the frames really can't hold when you're driving around. And when you compare this to the PC experience, this really does take away from something that could be utterly fantastic. That being said, I really did enjoy the story. I love how the lore and the backstory of the whole planet is being told through your conversations with others. And I really love the idea of a cozy game that involves so much driving around. So although this is a game I don't necessarily recommend on the Switch, if you have any other way to play it, I think you're going to have a blast. Another game I did really enjoy this month was the Plucky Squire. Although admittedly, this wasn't necessarily quite what I expected from the trailers, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And this is a game that follows Jot and his friends, a bunch of storybook characters, as they discover the 3D world that awaits them from outside of the pages. And the whole story centers around the fact that the villain of the book has in fact discovered that they are storybook characters. But instead of accepting his fate to lose this battle at the end of the book, he decides to change it. And he kicks the hero Jot out of the book and tries to change the story and their fate forever. And in order for Jot to restore the happy ending, he has to do far more than what the book tells him to do. Now, one of the things I absolutely love about this game is the art style. With there being such a mixture between the 2D art style, the 3D, but also the narrator reading everything that you do, you also get a change up in gameplay styles as well, especially when it comes to the fighting. But you also have a couple of abilities that I wasn't expecting. So for example, some of the puzzles that you come across will see you rearrange the words in a sentence to help you make it to the other side. Like for example, just saying that a gate is open instead of closed. And later in the game, you'll also develop the ability to jump outside of the book and flick between different pages to take words from other parts of the story and not just things on the same page, which I really did enjoy. Now, I will say this game was quite a lot easier than I was expecting. Like the puzzles, for example, are normally pretty straightforward. And if you do happen to get stuck, they do have an inbuilt hint system that helps as well. I was playing on the hardest difficulty, and for the most part, all of the battles and the fighting was pretty easy. And there were some times where I thought, oh, I'm coming up to a tricky part in the game, and it kind of spells out the solution straight away in front of you, so you don't really have to spend much time figuring anything out. But honestly, I didn't really care about the fact that this game was quite easy, because it was just so much fun to play. This is a fantastic game, whether you're older, younger, want to play it with your kids, want to play it by yourself. It's just so wacky in the best way. It has so much character to it that I just found myself smiling the entire time while I was playing it. And obviously this game looks better when you're playing it off of the Nintendo Switch, but I was pleasantly surprised by the way it plays on it. Now this is the Nintendo Switch we're talking about, so I couldn't talk about an indie game without talking about performance. The resolution's a bit weird and it kind of left the text boxes looking a little bit blurry. It wasn't unreadable, as you can tell from this footage, but definitely kind of noticeable, especially if you've seen what the PC version looks like. And there were, of course, some frame rate issues as well. None of this I felt detracted too much from the game. It had so many different art styles, and the areas you were in that did drop frames weren't areas you need to stick in for too long an amount of time. So for me, I enjoyed the game more than the frame rate issues made me not enjoy it. And despite the fact that it may only be an 8-hour game, it is something I thoroughly enjoyed. But do bear in mind there are some extras that you might want to go and collect, but for the most part, this doesn't offer a whole lot of replay value. So it's just a case of whether you think the price is worth it to you. Speaking of a game where I'm unsure whether the price is worth it, we have Epic Mickey Rebrushed. Now do bear in mind that I never played the original version of this, so I have no nostalgia tied to this whatsoever. So I'm just taking this at face value as it plays on the Nintendo Switch. Now I think a lot of people saw the Disney tag and thought this is a very light-hearted, whimsical Disney adventure. It's not. It's actually a lot darker than I thought it was, and perfect for the season. The main issue is this game is full £50 price. And whether this game is for you or not fully hinges on just, do you like 3D platformers? It's very traditional in that sense. There is a really cool mechanic where you can either take objects away by putting paint thinner on them, or build up objects to be there by painting them. And the story is pretty enjoyable as well. As I said, it wasn't something I expected it to be, having the Disney name, but it didn't mean it wasn't something I enjoyed. As this sees Mickey go through the wasteland armed with nothing but paint and paint thinner to try and shape the fate of this alternate world that he destroyed. And as you go throughout your journey, you'll get to see various different characters that you know and love from the Disney franchise. To me, this is a game best left until it goes on sale, but I know a lot of people love it. I'm just not sure that it's worth £50. Next up, let's talk about Loddlenauts. Now, I absolutely adored this game when it came out last year on PC and Steam Deck, and I'm so glad it's finally out on the Nintendo Switch, as this sees you dispatched to the bottom of the ocean to clean up all of the pollution. And this involves not only cleaning up trash, but also getting the gloop off of all of the plants and the life that lives there, and it'll even see you making friends with these little axolotl-like creatures. This is the perfect game to sit on the settee to and relax, as there's not a lot of thinking involved and just mindless cleaning and exploration. And as you go and collect more trash, you can trade it in for upgrade pieces that you can then use to make your job cleaning the bottom of the ocean just a little bit easier. And thankfully, thanks to its wonderfully whimsical art style, this runs flawlessly on the Nintendo Switch. And it even has an auto-aim feature that means playing with a controller is just so easy. And my favourite part by far is each of the different axolotl-like creatures. As they each live in different areas, you can befriend them, feed them, hang out with them, and they're each so cute. The Nintendo Switch version of the game also includes the DLC as well, so you get a lot for your money. And honestly, this is a fantastic cozy game, and I'm so glad it came to the Switch in such a good state. That's my roundup of all the games I've been playing recently on the Nintendo Switch. Let me know one of your favorites from the last couple of months in the comments down below. And if you want to see some fantastic games for the full season, click this video here.